Welcome everyone, and welcome to this webinar. My name is Vincent, and I'm responsible for the Workforce Management Unit at ORTEC. I'm delighted to introduce today's webinar program. So, as you probably all know, the manufacturing industry repeatedly encounters challenges such as fluctuating volumes, a diverse range of tasks, and growing demand for flexible skills. So, how can we ensure that workforce planning stays efficient and ready for the future? During this webinar, you'll uncover key strategies to optimize your workforce planning, both strategically and operationally, ensuring your organization remains agile and productive. We are very honored to have Professor Maenhout with us, who is an expert in operations management from the Ghent University, hence also our nice backgrounds with both the ORTEC and the Ghent University on it. So he will kick off the session by exploring how to implement flexibility in workforce planning, guiding us through strategic choices to operational execution. His presentation will focus on flexibility mechanisms within the strategic framework, but those aim to improve operational savings. So the key takeaway here is that proactive adjustments lead to more cost-effective planning, as last-minute changes, such as, for instance, hiring temporary staff, tend to be more expensive. Following Professor Maenhout, Jeroen Vangrunderbeeck, one of our industry leaders for workforce at ORTEC, will discuss ORTEC's innovative approach to workforce planning. He will dive deeper into how ORTEC workforce software can help automate, but also optimize your planning in new and innovative ways, aligning with strategic insights shared by the professors previously. Jeroen will provide a clear overview of where proactive steering can be implemented and which aspects might need reactive approaches. From a practical note, we encourage you to interact during the session, so feel free to use the chat feature to ask any questions. We'll ensure that all questions are answered either during this webinar or afterwards if needed. From my part already, thank you for joining us today. And I would say, yeah, let's get started with the professor.
You're muted, still muted.
Okay, thank you, Vincent, for the introduction. Thank you also for inviting me here today. So for the coming 15 to 20 minutes, I will provide you some insights in embedding flexibility when planning and scheduling personnel, and why this is necessary, and how this can be done at the different levels of decision-making at the strategic, tactical, and operational levels. So this research, what I will present here today, scopes in a project for which Vlaanders Make and Ghent University will collaborate together with ORTEC. And the reason for this project is that we identify the needs by companies that they have to deploy their personnel nowadays in a flexible manner in response to fluctuations in demand and personal requirements by personnel, and they want to know how to do this best in the most cost-efficient manner. So you have to know that all the different decisions for managing personnel at the strategic, tactical, and operational levels, these are all linked. But most companies do not know how strategic and tactical decisions are connected to the operational outcome. For example, when a company hires a particular worker, this is a strategic decision. They do not know, or they have no idea about what will be the implication of this decision on the tactical and operational level. So what will then be the increased performance? And what we intend with our research project, well, we want to give some insight into the linkages between different decision levels and required flexibility to cope with schedule disruptions in demand and capacity. So flexibility can be embedded in different ways across the different levels in the organization of resources, and there is not a single answer for how to do this best, but how this agility, how this flexibility should be defined best, well, this is depending upon the company specific situation. And now in this presentation, I will provide some insights into these. So the context is the following. So organizations do not operate in a static environment, but they operate in a dynamic environment where they encounter different supply chain uncertainties. This can be related to downstream supply chain. So there might be some fluctuations in demand, some logistic challenges, some changes in customer behavior. There are also some uncertainties related to the internal process, such that there might be some equipment breakdowns, some workforce absenteeism, and also upstream in the supply chain, there are also some uncertainties, such as some supplier delays, some raw material shortages, and these uncertainties, these create some disruptions in the organization and in the planning and scheduling of the demand and the resources, and making this planning aspect, this scheduling aspect, more complex. So basically, there is some variability in the operations of a company, leading to mismatches between what is planned and what actually happens. So there is variability in capacity, resources, employee turnover, sickness, absenteeism, uncertainty in demand, involving seasonal fluctuations, rush order of customers, some variability related to the task completion, and activities can start earlier than expected or later than expected. So we have a lot of different types of variability, and we have to cope with these in our schedules. So as a result of this operational variability, what we see is that the realized cost in companies is larger than the planned cost. And markups between realized and planned costs range between, in some industries, between 5% and to even 35%, depending upon the sector, the industrial context, the encountered uncertainty, the company practice, etc. And organizations should be ready for this. They should develop strategies to enhance resilience and optimize their operations to reduce this gap between this planned and realized cost. So let us take a look at the demand and resource management processes. And here we have a particular timeline, and we have to compose a particular schedule for a particular horizon, which is indicated here. And to compose then a schedule for that particular horizon, you have to know that different decisions are necessary in advance. So we have strategic decisions that involve long-term decisions with a horizon of 1 year or longer. And we then have to determine the personnel mix and budget. So the number of workers, what is the skill mix that we have to hire. We also have to determine what the aggregated production planning, which is based upon some company forecasts. And then these decisions are typically then effectuated in some schedules. We have personnel schedules, we have production schedules. Personnel schedules will define who is going to work which shift. Production schedules, well, there we're going to define then the daily production plan to ensure that the demand can be met. These decisions are categorized as strategic and tactical decisions, and apart from these decisions, we also have operational decisions, which are required to balance supply and demand in response to operational variability. So this is also called the firefighting of the operations manager at the production floor. And these decisions involve some real-time adjustment to align supply with the changing demand conditions. And in this particular phase, a reactive recovery to balance supply and demand is always necessary, is indispensable. And this is due to the fact that strategic and tactical decisions are based upon expected information. And this can be different from the actual demand and resource information that we will have at the moment that the schedule is executed. For example, the actual demand can be higher or lower than expected, or at the strategic and tactical levels, we assume that workers are always available, but you have to know that at the operational level, of course, workers can be sick or cannot be there. So at the operational level, the operations manager is responsible to ensure a feasible work plan, and in order to ensure this, he will have a number of possible actions that he can perform. For example, he can change production schedules, he can change personnel schedules by swapping tasks, or he can retime some tasks, etc. So to do this recovery, flexibility is required to do operational plan. So in case that we would have a very rigid plan, in that case, no adjustments would be possible, and then the imbalances will persist between supply and demand. So there's always some flexibility needed in adjusting the resource or the production schedule, and we should do this in order to then improve the schedule, in order to come up with a feasible working plan. For example, how can we include some flexibility? This is, for example, done by hiring multi-skilled workers, and these multi-skilled workers, well, in that case, it will be easier then to adjust your workforce schedule. Or another type of flexibility is that we will allow workers to do some overtime. This is also some kind of flexibility. So what we intend to do, or what we will do, and what we already have done for some time, we try to set up a kind of harmonized architecture from strategic to operational decision making. So by this goal, we want to align the different decision phases so that the impact of the strategic decisions, of tactical decisions, will become clear at the operational level. And this is a main need that we have identified in companies. They make decisions at the strategic level, but basically companies have little idea what the impact will be. So for example, if they hire a specific person with specific skills, it is not known what the operational gains will be. And we do not only want to assess these strategic decisions, but we also want to optimize these decisions. So we want to make use of a kind of decision-making tool. We want to optimize our decision to determine what is now the best profile of the worker that we are going to hire next time. Apart from this so-called top-down approach, we also going to approach the problem in a different way. We're also going to use a kind of bottom-up perspective. So this means that now we are going to start from the operational challenges, such as specific disruptions or a bottleneck at the production floor. And then the goal is to provide some recommendations for what is now the most appropriate tactical and strategic solution to tackle these issues in a better way. So this bottom-up approach tries to find out how specific issues can better be resolved at higher decision levels, so that next time we do not encounter the same disruption at this lower operational level. So with this architecture, we are going to look at problems from a top-down, from a bottom-up perspective, and this will allow us to improve our decision-making throughout the entire resource management process. And apart from this architecture that we are establishing, it's also important, it's also of our interest to devise how flexibility should be embedded over these different decision levels. So flexibility can be implemented at the strategic level, tactical level, operational level. So you can, for example, add some flexibility by hiring more workers. This is a strategic decision, or flexibility can also be embedded at the tactical level. In that case, you can introduce some time buffers in your production schedule, or you can introduce some capacity buffers in your personnel schedule. This will add some flexibility, but the question is, how should we do this? What can we do? How should we look at different interdependencies between different policies? So let us take a look at a number of options. So on this slide here, you can see here different types of policies that can be implemented and that can add some flexibility to your schedule. You can have some flexibility policies on the demand side, where you work upon the production schedule. You can also have some flexibilities at the resource side, where you will work upon the resource schedule. And the different types of policies can be situated at the strategic, tactical, and operational level. For example, at the strategic level, you can decide to do some outsourcing where you involve a third party to deliver the goods, or you can decide to to integrate your production schedules, your aggregated planning with your long-term resource schedules, with your budgeting exercise. You can also work upon the workforce size, a number of workers, the skill mix. You can also take into account the contract types of workers. We have seen in research, for example, that adding more part-time workers also adds some kind of flexibility to your resource schedules. So these are all relevant types of flexibility policies that you can include. So I know that not all of these options are all relevant for a company, and typically a limited number of them. So companies can give indication which policies they usually want to implement and they want to include in their resource and production management. So companies can, for example, decide to use outsourcing at the strategic level, to use some skill relaxation in the resource schedules at the tactical level, and at the operational level, they can focus upon skill relaxation, swapping tasks between workers, or also some line or task cancellation. This is what companies can indicate. Our intention with our research project is that we will also have a kind of recommendation module where we're going to indicate what is now the best type of flexibility that needs to be added in view of the company context, in view of the uncertainty profile of the company, etc. And then we are going to evaluate these different policy settings, and this will be done based upon different dimensions. So on the one hand, we have the operational excellence, as you can see, and this can be measured by different performance indicators such as cost, time, quality, personnel satisfaction, etc. And on the other hand, we also have the stability of the schedule, because embedding flexibility increases the number of changes to the schedule and increases also the schedule nervousness. So this is also an important dimension that we want to measure when we introduce some additional flexibility in the process. So there is clearly a trade-off between the different dimensions, and the goal will then be to assess the performance for these different dimensions, starting from the as-is situation, and to determine what is now the best policy configuration, the optimized policy to improve then the operational excellence. So you can see this here on the figure. So the red dot represents the performance of the current policy. The green dot records a larger operational performance for the optimized policy, while sacrificing only a little in terms of schedule stability. So this is our expectation based upon our previous research already, based upon the literature. So the positions of these dots is just exemplary, but it shows that what we have learned so far in previous studies, that a small addition in flexibility typically improves performance significantly. So in previous years, we have already done some studies that will give some proof of concept to the theory that I have just discussed. So I will go over two example cases. For both studied environments, there was some operational variability in demands. Demand is fluctuating over time. And the first application involves a logistics service center here in Ghent. And you can see that for this company, there is a kind of seasonal pattern in the demand. And the problem at the logistics center was the following. So the company realized high personnel costs because of the high cost for temporary workers, as it was too costly to just hire and fire regular personnel after some point of time. And also incurring more overtime hours to meet the demand was also not desired. And to cope with then these fluctuations in demand, the company relied upon the hiring of temporary workers to meet the peak demand. But also this was not very satisfactory for the company, because it also leads to large personnel costs. And what we have proposed is the following. So instead of using temporary workers to deal with variability demand, we propose to use the concept of annualized hours. So this was implemented to schedule personnel in a more flexible manner. So this means that we advise then the company to negotiate new contracts with their workers. And these new contracts will embed some higher flexibility related to the number of working hours per week. So when the demand in a week was higher, in that case, the workers were required to perform a larger number of hours, whereas when the demand in a week was lower, the workers were needed to work fewer hours. Fairness is an important item in this context, so we have to make sure also that the devised rosters were also very fair. And apart from this, what we also have done, we also integrated the long-term production planning with this system of annualized hours, and based upon this, we were able to reduce costs. And another application involves a food manufacturing company, and there the uncertainty was different. So there was no specific seasonal pattern, but rather there were some day-to-day changes, and there we encountered substantial changes into the required daily staffing. And in order to tackle this, we proposed some proactive, reactive mechanism to implement some form of flexibility in the operation. So we devised two different versions indicated in red, and the additions are indicated in black over here. These are all different flexibility policies that were also stated on one of the previous slides. And based upon these two different versions, we were able to lower the markup costs, the difference between realized and planned cost. So you can see here the cost according to the current practices of the company. And because of the optimization that we have done, and also the optimization of the use of the different agility, flexibility policies, we were able to reduce cost. So this is with the the flexibility measures indicated in red, and by addition of the additional policies, we were able to further reduce the cost, and in total we were able to reduce cost by 40% of this markup cost versus the current practices. So in this research project, it is our intention to further work upon this topic, and we are going to collaborate together with ORTEC, and we will try to learn from each other. In their software, ORTEC focuses upon the tactical decision level, mainly upon the scheduling of personnel. It's also a very interesting, a very wide software. It considers a wide range of features for modeling a large range of different business environments. And it's also our intention to use the ORTEC solver in our research. So with our research, we will contribute in this way to the further development by focusing upon multi-level decision making, considering strategic, tactical, and operational decisions, and study how these are all interrelated to come to better decisions. And we will also try to determine what is the best method to embed agility in the workforce schedules, in the production schedules, to mitigate then the impact of this operational variability on the operations of a company, and to obtain some insights into the uncertainty and how this can help us then to define what is the best configuration of policy settings of flexibility for a specific company. Okay, this is my part. I will now give the floor to Jeroen.
Okay, thank you, Prof. I cannot take over control of presentation, so I'll just share the PowerPoint myself. It should be quickly switched. Yeah, I see a thumb, so I suppose everyone can see my screen. Thank you, Bros, for the inspiring view on flexibility. I really like the distinction you make between applying flexibility strategically, tactically, and also operational. We indeed have more focus on the tactical and operational part, but it's also very much linked to what I will tell later. First, I have another slide. I would like to start when we look at manufacturing and workforce scheduling at the 4 biggest challenges that we notice, experience, have seen. So the first one, and I hope that the attendees will recognize them. The first one is the fluctuation of volumes. It was also already on a slide of Broos. During the year, there are differences in seasons, but also maybe within a week or maybe within a day between different operations, fluctuations might appear for capacity need, and that leads to a fluctuation need of your workforce. The second challenge which we focus on is that when we get to know the real expected volumes, that there are often very big differences with the forecast, and this leads to a need of last-minute rescheduling, which is very difficult and which has an effect on the markup cost, which has Broos mentioned, but also on your employee happiness. So we also want to do something for that. The third challenge we are focusing on is the distribution of employees among various teams and departments. We notice that in many companies, parts of it are still organized very decentrally, which leads to difficulties in exchanging employees between teams, which is needed to make a full optimal use of the available capacity and all the skills that are available before you go to create extra costs, like for example with interim. And the fourth one is the always being short in employees, the absenteeism of employees, the cost of training, the fact that we are always hiring employees and training employees. So as ORTEC, we are focused on that in our software, and we have for those 4 challenges also 4 answers. Let's see what happens if I click. Yeah. So the first one is that we have integrated a platform for temp agencies, for in-house temp agencies, so they can easily collaborate with the company. They can manage their pool of employees within that platform, and they can receive all the requests. So it makes it possible not only for longer term week contracts or month contracts, but also for the ad hoc request just the day before, to really facilitate the collaboration and make it run smooth. The second one is the shift scheduling, which we want to make more intelligent by adding an algorithm which is constantly calculating based on the forecast what the workload is needed, and comparing it with the capacity we have available, and also importantly with the capabilities we have available. So it gives you an insight constantly of for which capabilities you will be short, so that you can proactively act on that as soon as possible. The third one is our optimizer for task scheduling. So when we go towards day -1 and we have a certain capacity available and we get to know the real expected volumes, we need to act upon that. So we have an optimizer which can run across different departments, and it automates the borrow and lending of your employees between those departments, so that it makes it possible to make really optimal use of your capacity before you go into creating costs over time, adding employees, adding interim employees. Let's make first the most optimal use of your capacity. And then the last one is about shortage. So we want to we focus strongly on employee satisfaction. Firstly, by creating a better balanced workload, by minimizing the actions which are needed for rescheduling on day -1, make it more proactively, do it more ahead. And secondly, also by involving the employees in the scheduling process, by giving them a mobile application where they can swap shifts with each other, post requests, express wishes to be scheduled differently, so that we can take all these things into account when creating and adjusting a schedule. Now, Next slide. Let's look at the scheduling process. What we see is that mostly, in many occasions, in software, it's limited to employee management and shift scheduling. We manage employees, their contracts, their capabilities, the number of hours they work, the labor rules, and we apply it into shift scheduling. Or at least that is what we see in other workforce solutions. With ORTEC, we see the scheduling process much larger, and we want to give the support also much larger. So ahead of that, or at the front of that, we put a workload calculation algorithm so that we can start with volumes. So we can put in your volumes that you expect, manage your workload calculation rules so that we can automatically, constantly calculate the workload. So anytime that the volumes are updated in your schedule, you see the updated result of the workload, and you get immediately an insight in how you are overall understaffed for each capability. And also, when we come closer to operation, more in the operational part, we want to do something with the task scheduling. And like I already mentioned on the previous slide, we want to do that with an optimizer to make it possible to schedule across different departments and make optimal use of your capacity and employees before you start using temp agency. But also there, we have integrated that platform into our software so that it's also running smooth, the collaboration with temp agencies. And still, we don't stop. Also on the day itself, we call it execution scheduling. On the day itself, there might be a new update of volumes. Employees might not show up, they might be sick, or something else happens. And during operation, some operation or on some production lines, we might run faster than expected or faster than productivity figures set, which means that on some operations we might run ahead and somewhere we might run behind. So there we want to create that entire insight and create proposals so that we make it smart when you move employees from one area to another area, that you move the employees with the right skills from an area where we are running ahead towards an area where we are running behind. So this is what we as ORTEC see as a scheduling process that we want to take in scope within our software. And when we put it on a timeline, it gets to look a little bit like in the presentation of Prof as well. It goes more from the strategic part with employee management, where you manage your employees and your skills and the contracts and everything, towards the technical part, more where you, based on a forecast, are optimizing the available capacity to be prepared for the day of operation. And then I call it more operational when we run and when we get to know, which is number 4 here, when we get to know the real expected volumes, we can start to act on that so that we can, in the operational phase, do the optimal task scheduling. And why is that important? So why do we do the proactive workforce scheduling? And it's not only preparing for the operation day, but by being better prepared for the operation day, we can decrease the markup costs that we create on that day. By limiting the number of, the better we are scheduled ahead, the cheaper it is. Scheduled hours are cheaper than additional hours over time, than interim hours. So we want to do that as optimal as it can. And also very important is that schedule changes that we make for our workforce, if we do it proactively, it can increase employee happiness, and increasing employee happiness also has in turn a positive effect on decreasing the absenteeism, increasing productivity, increasing retention rates, and decreasing training costs. When we look at the reactive workforce scheduling, which we do on day -1 and during the day itself, and it's really important because we need to safeguard our service levels, we need to run the operation smooth, but it does have an effect on the markup cost, which we want to reduce. So by doing it as optimal as possible with your own capacity, we can reduce these costs before we go towards overtime and interim. And also by limiting the number of actions you have to do, we also limit the effect that it has on the employee happiness. I want to show you also a little part with a demo. I'm only going to show you that last part, the task scheduling, which is kind of a sneak preview you get into our software. So I'm going to start and share my screen completely. Share. There it is. Just probably I need to log in here. Yeah, so this is how we log in. It's a connection with your with the customer active directory. Once you are into the software, into the domain of task scheduling, so this is what you manage on the day before operation. I'm going to an empty day. So here, imagine that we are creating a schedule for Saturday, upcoming Saturday. Then it looks like this in our application. On top, you get a view of your employees. So in this view, we get all the employees of the operation. So in this demo environment, I've got like 600 employees all grouped together. So which makes it very important to have proper filters and search possibilities. So if you're searching for an employee with a name like Alex, you can just type it here and it will filter the screen and limit it to any employee with a name which is somewhere linked to Alex. If you want to remove the filter, you can just click on the X and you see all the employees again. And we also have like other filters so that you can limit it to just one specific production line, for example. Then you get only to see that production line, only the employees who are default linked to that production line, and on the bottom you only get to see the workload for that specific production line. You can also filter it more, that you only want to see, for example, one team, and then you get to see one team who is logically working all together in the same pattern. So here is team A working in work area line 1 and all the employees there. And on the bottom, you still see the workload only for line 1. You can remove the filters just by clicking here, or you can just like this one, then you get to see all the teams again, or you also can click on the reset filters and then you get all the employees all together again. In the workload at the bottom, we make it possible to define that you want to see the workload as a number of employees required or as a workload expressed in the number of hours required. Like for the first one, in this example, I've created that it's expressing that we need 40 hours. And the second one, it's just stating that we need 1 employee. Why this distinction? With the 40 hours workload demand expression, we make it possible to combine, when we run our task scheduler optimizer, to combine multiple tasks within one shift. And also to not do roundings, but just do exact scheduling of required workload. So this is the view you see. At this point, employees are not assigned a task yet. And at the bottom, we have a task. So we can just drag and drop tasks towards an employee. Doing that, normally you will easily bump into violations. Like here, there is a violation. Probably it's a violation because the employee doesn't have the proper skills. So it's showing you that you cannot schedule this employee because he is not skilled to do that job. But this is manual scheduling, and we want to make it everything smart. So we have an optimizer, and next to an optimizer, we also have an action list. So if you go to the action list, it is, I will show it for previous day first. It is running you through an entire process of scheduling one day. So it's first preparing you to, before you run the optimizer, in making sure that you have the needed capacity available, that there are no labor rule violations, that you maybe need to add some shifts, things like that. Then when you have run the optimizer, that's a simple step. You just need to click one button. And then there are actions to complete a schedule after the optimizer has run. Schedules which are linked to violations, schedules which are linked to the number of hours which are minimal required to schedule employees. Then you can publish it, and then you can request agency employees. This is collaborations with the temp agencies. And then you can also have actions during execution on the day itself to move employees from left to right. So if we look to a new day, I'm going to skip to prepare for optimization. I'm just going to start and run the optimizer. So this optimizer, it will run across all these teams, all these work areas, production lines, and will assign the workload as optimal as it can, taking into account fill rates. And a fill rate is, for example, that for a certain task, we say that you can only assign it for a minimum of 2 hours, so that we avoid assigning employees towards a task for only like 15 minutes, so that it's a certain... Also, the distances between different production lines or different areas in an operation can be configured so that we avoid scheduling employees on 2 different tasks which require a walk time of 15 minutes, so that we make sure that they are scheduled on tasks which are close to each other. We also can optimize the break windows so that we make sure that on one area, not everyone is taking break at the same moment, but that we optimize the breaks within the scheduled shift so that the operation keeps on running as smoothly as possible. And there are also a lot of other rules that we can configure in creating the schedule. So in this, after this optimizer has run, we get to see the result. It shows you some colors to make clear that if there are 2 tasks scheduled on 1 employee. At the bottom, you get to see the effect on the workload. So you get to see the number of hours required compared to the number of hours scheduled. When it's correctly scheduled, it becomes blue. When we have a shortage, we get a red color. Also for managing that, we have some easy filters, and it's also from the action list helping you to manage it. So in the first step, there is a button to solve overstaffing. So I can click on it, show in schedule, and it will add 2 filters. It will add the filter for all the employees who are not fully staffed. So we get to see employees where we have still capacity available to schedule them additionally. And the other filter is that we only want to see the understaffed workloads. So all the workloads which are already correctly staffed, they are filtered out of this screen. So here we can start adding employees. It might be needed that you do some overstaffing, or that you ask employees to shorten their shift, or that you move employees who are not scheduled toward a late shift or towards a previous shift. So you see in this example that we are actually short in the early shift, that we are overstaffed on the late shift, and that we are again short in the night shift. So our capacity available should have been better. We should have been better distributed. So in this case, in this example, the day before operation, we need to do a lot of rescheduling. So you can move shifts, delete shifts, edit shifts, change the shift hours. You can also do something with the task, make one task longer so that we create an overstaffing, or add another task. All these actions are possible to optimize your schedule. I see we are already running towards the end of our time. Just quickly going to the request. All these understaffing, they are recalculating as temp agency requests. So if I don't solve this one, then the temp agency request can be asked starting from here. It's a proposal, so you can configure the different temp agencies you have, and then push the request towards those temp agencies. And also for workloads which are expressed in hours, they are translated in this view into a number of employees which are required. So when I do the request, then these requests are sent to the temp agency. and then imagine that I am responsible for a temp agency, then I can go towards that domain. And then in that domain, you get all the requests that needs to be answered. You also have, these are the ad hoc requests, and they also have a view on the different contracts which are running. So they already have employees with a contract for a month or a contract for a week. And when answering such a request, I'll just take one example. It's showing you the employees in their pool who have the proper skills to be scheduled. So you can choose the employees out of the pool and assign them to the request, so that once the assignment is fulfilled, you can return to the request overview and see the remainings. I'm going to stop here, I think, because I think I've shown the most important part of it.
Jeroen, in the meanwhile, I received a question, and the question is, can the tool that you just showed also be easily interfaced or integrated with existing ERP systems? And does the same mechanism then also apply for the software that the temp agencies use?
Yeah, so this is cloud software. So the cloud software is also has an open API. So for creating an integration as a company, you can freely talk to our open API for pushing data in it or for getting data out of it. And as with an open API, every data field in our application is manageable from the outside. So you can push any data field inside of it or retrieve anything out of it. So yes, that's possible.
Thank you. I guess since there were no questions at this moment in time, also for all the attendees, please, if there are questions that might arise afterwards, feel free to ask us. I think you know how to find us via email or via our website. I wanted to thank Professor Broos and also Jeroen for giving the nice presentations and the insights. Would also like to mention that the recordings will be shared afterwards with everybody. So if there are interesting bits in here that you wanted to share with some colleagues or others, feel free to do so. And then thanks all for attending, and see you next time.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.